Hi everybody, my name is Amy and I'm one of the librarians in the Pennsylvania department at Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh. Today I wanted to bring the conversation back to vital records, specifically birth certificates, to talk about what sort of information we can find on the birth certificates and how that's helpful for us as we continue to build our family trees. For a much longer explanation of what records exist for Allegheny County and Pennsylvania, and where to find them, please refer back to our April 14th video where I spent way longer than I probably should have talking about all of the ins and outs and pluses and minuses of where you can find those records. So what will we learn from a birth certificate aside from the obvious date of birth of the person that we're looking for? Believe it or not, that depends on the exact time and place in which you're doing your research. For Allegheny County, where you'll have a combination, depending on the time period, of birth registers and birth certificates, you will consistently get a name, a birth date, the sex of the baby, and the parents' names. Usually you'll also find the place where they were born, and you can kind of work from there with the address to see if the baby was born at home or in a hospital. One note of caution on those birth registers, don't confuse the registration date of the birth with the date of birth. A lot of times doctors and midwives would save up until they had a stack of births that they needed to register with the city or the county, and they would do it all at once. So make sure that when you are documenting all of the information from the birth register, that you're taking down the birth date, not the registration date. So also in those early birth registers, you will find the father's occupation most of the time, and then toward the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, those registers will start to list where the parents of the person named on the birth certificate were born. One very frustrating thing about those records is that even though it lists both parents' names, it lists the mother 99% of the time by her married name. So we can't always use those early birth certificates as a clue to the mother's maiden name, which is what helps us get back one more generation and research that maternal line a little bit further. Spot checking records, I started to see records in the 1890s that would a little bit of the time listing mother's maiden names, maybe as a middle name, maybe just as her first name and maiden name. But really, you don't consistently start to learn the mother's maiden name until the state of Pennsylvania starts issuing birth certificates in 1906. So in 1906, the Pennsylvania took over issuing all of those certificates, and the information becomes a lot more consistent and a lot more useful to us long term. Like I said, that elusive mother's maiden name is on there. You get both parents' ages and occupations, and those ages give you a great clue as to when to be looking for birth records or immigration records or anything like that for those family members. You will find out if the ancestor you're researching was a single birth or one of a multiple. You will find out the number of children who were previously born to the mother listed on the certificate, as well as how many are still living at the time of the birth that's on that birth certificate. This is very helpful because this, combined with census records and other research, can help you determine if there are other siblings of your ancestor that you maybe didn't know about before. You will find out whether the person named on the birth certificate was legitimate or illegitimate at birth. And for you real detail hounds, the name of the doctor or midwife is also on the certificate. Although I have to say I've never had anybody ask for that information or try to document that information. So why do we want all of this? Well, it helps prove what we think we know about our ancestor. Maybe this person is one of those question marks, one of those blank spots on your pedigree chart that we talked about from a few weeks ago, and you just know they were born sometime in the early 1900s. Well, this gives you a specific date and a lot more concrete information that you can work with. The information on those birth certificates was provided by people with firsthand knowledge of the answers to the questions being asked. It was one of the parents who was providing the information, so they should be a fairly accurate source of information about their ages and occupations and where they were born and all of that type of detail. So what do you do if the registry entry or the birth certificate that you find isn't exactly a match for what you were hoping to find? Maybe it doesn't list a first name for the baby, just a last name and sex because they hadn't come up with a name for the baby yet. Well, look at what other details on that entry or birth certificate do match up. If the names of the parents match up with the names that you were expecting to find, that's a clue that this could be the person you are researching. If the birth date is close to what you're expecting to find, that's another clue in the positive column. So you really just have to look at all the pieces and make sure that the parents and this baby on this birth certificate have a pretty good chance of being the one that you're trying to find. If there's a lot of information that really doesn't match, if the year is off, or if a parent's name is spelled differently, maybe just put that document over in your maybe file and look for some information that might corroborate that and clear up a question mark on your pedigree chart, or confirm or deny whether the record you found is the record you need. Something like a baptismal record or a christening record could be that extra piece of information that sorts all of that out. But do take this birth certificate and combine it with other records that you've been starting to assemble over time. Is baby girl Smith born when the person you thought was the right mother was maybe only 5 or 6 years old? That's probably not the right mother. Was baby girl Smith born 2 years after the person that you thought was her father had died? Probably not the right father, somewhere along the way. So it's either just a mistake in transcribing information or you've been chasing the wrong person. Either way, it's a good chance to say, wait a minute, the clues don't add up. Let me go back and look at this again. So that is pretty much what I wanted to cover in a very short introduction to birth certificates and how we use them in genealogy. If you have any questions about certificates that you've found or kind of dead ends that you've run into in searching for birth records, please post them in the comments below and I will do my best to answer your questions or point you in the right direction to find those records. If you have any other questions about genealogy, please feel free to offer suggestions for topics for future videos. I do have a list, so there's plenty more coming, but if there are specific questions that you are trying to answer that I can turn into a more general help video for people, then I'm more than happy to tackle your question and make that information available to everyone else. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.